Prospector rides the rail in third. Nadal has a final 3/16, and this is the acid test, and he leads by a length and a half. 3 Technique to the outside. Here comes Coach Baugh, a massive long shot running a big race. Between horses goes Accession, who's come from the back of the pack. And look at this. It is Accession and Nadal. Nadal, Accession, Nadal aces the Rebel.
Welcome back to another edition of the Racing Rundown on YouTube, and we have an excellent edition for you here. The second division of the Arkansas Derby coming up this Saturday, May 2nd, goes as race 13 on the Oakland Park card, and we are fortunate to have such a good field here. Obviously not every great 3-year-old in the country showing up for this race, but a very solid consolation for what would have been coming up this Saturday in the Kentucky Derby. And I'm very excited to talk about this group. We have 10 really good horses. There is one scratch. The 8-horse Fast Enough from California had some shin issues and won't be running in the second division of the Arkansas Derby this Saturday. So he's the lone scratch that we know so far. Hopefully we have no other defections. So we're going to go through every single horse here from the inside post all the way to the outside, talk about each horse individually, what we have seen from them so far, kind of an unbiased look at them for the most part. Then after that, I'll talk about kind of how the pace will shape up, as well as my personal opinions on how I think this race is going to end. So we'll start with the one, Finnick the Fierce. Very, very battle-tested horse here is Finnick the Fierce. Last time out, a winner by disqualification in a allowance race at Oakland, where he necessarily wasn't the horse that got bothered the most. There was another horse that got bothered the most, but he did cross the wire second, and the winner was disqualified. So he did technically win his last start. I do wonder with a little less trouble if he would have won it outright as well. Martin Garcia was aboard for the first time in that race, and he does return for the ride here. Before that, this horse had ran in 3 straight graded stakes, the Kentucky Jockey Club, where he was second at 88-1, and then in the LeCompte, he was 4th, in the Risen Star, he was 7th. And something I have to say about both of those races, and really anyone coming out of those races in general, especially the Risen Star, we've seen horses come out of that on paper didn't look super good, but in their next race they ran superbly. So it was a deep group, a talented group, and I think that he is a horse with a lot of talent. I just do wonder if this is a race with so much talent that he'll be able to break through at this grade 1 level. Moving on to the 2, Saratogian, and in such a loaded group, he's really the only horse that it's hard to make some kind of case for. Only 2 career starts, broke his maiden at Tampa in February by a nose. Then in an allowance race at Gulfstream Park, he ran 9th, and not a lot of excuses for him in that race. Just didn't look good. And these aren't connections you'd necessarily would think would take a shot with. In a big race like this, Starlight Racing, Matticat Stables, FS Racing, the same connections that own good horses like Nadal and Charlatan, they show up in this spot, and it's a little weird, honestly. Rodolphe Brissett is a trainer. Joe Talmo aboard for the first time. I can't make a case for this horse beaten 13 lengths by weaker last time out with no real excuse. He's going to need to do a lot to win. The 3, the defending 2-year-old champion, Storm the Court, and his 2 starts this year have been disappointing, but if he can turn in anything like that Breeders' Cup Juvenile performance, he might be looking pretty good in this race. That is only one of his only 2 wins in his career. He's lost the other 4, and well beaten at that, I might add. Beaten nearly 6 lengths in the San Felipe last time out. Before that, beaten 2 1/4 lengths the San Felipe was that 3rd, and then 4th in the San Vicente. Both of those starts coming this year at Santa Anita, a track we know he likes because he won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile over it. I have a hard time, saying that. There's really just no excuses for those 2 races, and that Breeders' Cup Juvenile has been a very weak group. There has not been anything impressive coming out of that Breeders' Cup Juvenile whatsoever. Every single horse from that race that has returned to run has seemingly thrown in a poor performance. The only horse who I can think that won anything notable was Full Flat, the Japanese horse who ran 5th in that race, went on to win the Saudi Arabian Derby. So obviously there's a lot of room for improvement for this horse, even though he was the 2-year-old champ. But he was well beaten by Nadal, well beaten by Authentic. he needs to step it up, plain and simple, if he wants to be competitive in this race. Moving on to the number 4 horse now, King Guillermo, the surprise winner of the Tampa Bay Derby. He was 49-1 in that race, and he won by nearly 5 lengths, beating a pretty decent field there. Yeah, honestly, it's interesting. I personally was a really big fan of this horse coming out of it, but this is such a tough spot for him to return in. And I mean, I'm going to touch on the pace scenario later, but it's going to do him no favors in this race. I love his trainer, Wanavila. Sammy Camacho does return. He was aboard for that Tampa Bay Derby win. His works have been just fine. Really nice speed figures. On paper he looks super good, but there's so many external factors that I think are just holding me back from really loving this horse. But listen, he's 2 for 4 lifetime. That Tampa Bay Derby one was just out of this world and out of nowhere, really, because his previous experience wasn't that great in terms of competing at that level. So we'll see. But I mean, the pedigree suggests everything is there, and it's going to be interesting for sure. We'll talk about the pace in a little bit, and that'll kind of explain why I'm not in love with him in this spot. But Tampa Bay Derby winner, obviously very good resume. The 5 horse Nadal, and the very hyped horse, winner of the Rebel and the San Vicente, as well as a maiden win, 3 for 3 this year, 3 for 3 in his career, $700,000 2-year-old purchase. There's just loads of talent behind this horse. But my big thing with this horse is the pace scenario. That's plain and simple what's gonna be make or break for him. The Rebel, he went 46 flat, nearly suicidal pace for any racehorse, and he somehow digged down and won that Rebel. I still can't really believe it myself that he was able to do it. And he kind of did the same thing in the San Vicente, where he went really fast early on but stuck around. But the big thing here is the speed that's going to go with him in this race. He's very talented. Horses like King Guillermo, Storm the Court's going to be right up there with him, trying to, enforce a quick pace, as well as the 11 horse Wells Bayou, who we'll touch on in a little bit. And I just wonder if that's going to be his undoing in this race. He has all the talent in the world. And the big thing here, Bob Baffert's been trying to work him off the pace. He's worked him with a horse in front of him to try to get him used to closing in a scenario where he'd have to close in on a horse rather than be in front of the horse the entire way. But I mean, you can't really say if that's going to work or not unless, he has tons of other horses around him and he actually has to do it in a race scenario. But his works have been impressive. I'll give him that. He looks like the horse that can do it. I'm not against him by any means in this race. I just wonder if that's something that's going to hinder his ability to win after such a rough Rebel. A race that really was the undoing for a lot of other horses in that race. Code Runner is the 6 for Steve Asmussen, big long shot, where we are very accustomed to seeing the Calumet Silks in these big graded stakes races with long shots, and sometimes they do put in good performances. Code Runner 50-1 on the morning line. His last time out was a winner in allowance race at Sam Houston, but before then, well beaten in multiple races. Now he does have some decent backlasses. 2 races ago in a sprint race, he was third behind Long Weekend, who came back to win a stakes at Oakland this previous weekend. So some good backlash, but his lone stakes start, a minor stakes at Sunland Park, he finished 7th, beaten 24 lengths, finishing last. So there's a lot he needs to do to improve in this race. Really hard to make a case for him. That last race was good. I'll give him that. His last performance was super impressive, but he's going to need to do a lot more if he wants to be remotely competitive in this race. Does have a nice pedigree though, out of a Grade 1 winning mare on turf, Nareed, out of by honor code, $375,000 yearling. So by those standards, he is very highly regarded. The 7, Silver Prospector, the winner of the Southwest, one of the many Oakland Derby preps that we've seen. He's actually danced all the dances he's ran in the Smarty Jones, Southwest, and the Rebels through the Arkansas Derby. Will complete that Oakland Derby prep superfecta, if you will, and he does have a win in one of those. Also, last fall, the winner of the Kentucky Jockey Club. He's ran more than any other horse in this race, 9 career starts. And really, when you look at it, 3 wins and 9 starts, and only 2/3 to go along with that. Don't look that good, but you draw a line through those turf performances, and he's been really good on the dirt. And I'm not one who adheres to the every other race pattern. There are definitely people out there who think there are certain horses that only perform every other race, and this horse would fall right into that category. He has won every other race since going to dirt. That included the Kentucky Jockey Club and the Southwest. He ran awful in the Rebel last time, but this is the other race now, so he could be primed for a big performance. I think that Rebel was not the best race for any horse in that race. I think the mud, the pace, it was just a wonky race, plain and simple. I think it's a race you could easily draw a line through for any horse that did not perform well, and a big boost for any horse that did run well, like Nadal. I think he's primed for a big bounce back performance here. He's a horse I'm heavily considering. That Southwest win over Wells Bayou, I might add, was just too good to ignore, I think, as well as that Kentucky Jockey Club performance. And his speed figures are right up there with the best of them, too, especially that Southwest speed figure. So, really nice horse. And honestly, when you look at it, sure, he did win the Kentucky Jockey Club over a sloppy track and over Tis the Law, I might add. That alone, Tis the Law, to me, and I think to the majority of people out there that on either Charlatan or Nadal have him at the top of their Derby lists. For Silver Prospector to beat him, that speaks volumes. So, but he has put in some dull performances over off tracks, despite that Kentucky Jockey Club win. So I do wonder possibly if that was just a one-off performance and he doesn't actually really like it that much. So a fast track might be better for him. That is something I guess we'll find out this Saturday. Point is, I really like Silver Prospector. We already touched on the 8 fast enough scratching, so on to the 9. Tyshaun, 2 for 6 lifetime, last time out. Third in the Oakland Steaks behind Mr. Big News and Farmington Road. The first time I've really seen him come off the pace and been impressed by him, he was probably mid-pack, and I would say mid-pack at least. And he finished really well. I just don't think anybody was going to beat those top 2 on that day. But I liked his performance there. He does have a win at Oakland, 2 starts back by almost 5 lengths. Very nice win there. And I mean, I have a hard time, saying this is a top horse because his losses have been to really good horses for sure. But then you look at his wins, and I mean, they're not super impressive. The horses coming out of those wins, maybe he's just getting some class relief. He's lost to the likes of Authentic and Ginobili and Silver Prospector, and now Mr. Big News in Farmington Road, and he's been well beaten at that, and he has never lost by a small margin. But his 2 wins have been impressive, and listen, if he's able to come from off the pace, a stalking position like he did last time out, it's easy to make a case for him. And one of the biggest things with him is his speed numbers, his speed figures averaged out are 4th best in this race. So that is very, very nice, a very nice thing for his resume against this very tough group. And listen, with the right trip, like I think a lot of these horses with the right trip, they could get lucky and either hit the board or get the win. The 10 Farmington Road, Todd Fletcher's trainee here for Javier Castellano is going to climb aboard. This will be the 3rd time he's aboard him in his career. Only 1 win in 5 starts, but he's better on visually than he is on paper. I think it's very easy to draw a line through a first start for any horse. That was really his only bad performance, and even then he was kind of finishing well. He was really out of it early on, but you look at his races this year, when he's gotten out to 2 turns, he seems like he's really picked it up, and the pedigree being by Quality Road does suggest he's going to like longer distances. 2nd in the Oakland Steaks last time out, close from way out of it. And even before then, I touched on it on the podcast a bunch when we were discussing the Oakland Steaks. I loved this horse because I think that Risen Star looked much better visually than it did on paper. And that Oakland Steaks, he flew home weight. I think if Castellano is smart with him and doesn't let him get 17 lengths off the lead and last like he was in the Oakland Steaks, they're going to be in a great position. They just need to be a little bit closer. The pace is going to be hot enough for him. I think that this is a horse that's going to come running late. I think this is a horse that is peaking at the right time. We talk so much around Derby time, finding the horse that's peaking at the right time. I don't see why this horse does not fit that billing based on his past few performances. And the 11, the last horse we'll touch on in this field of 10, is the Louisiana Derby winner, Wells Bayou. It's not a problem. He won at 1 mile and 3/16 last time. Florent Giroux climbs back aboard. 2nd in the Southwest, 2 starts back behind Silver Prospector. The big thing here with this horse is trying to not burn himself out on the lead. The Louisiana Derby was practically handed to him, and I don't think there's any arguing that fact that all the other speed horses backed off thinking it was going to be a hot pace, and Florent Geroux took the risk, and he got into the lead, and it paid huge dividends as they went wire to wire in the Louisiana Derby. The second and third place finishers were second and third the whole way around too, so everybody benefited from that race. The Southwest before that might have been a little bit, more telling of his ability on the front end. 46-3 for a half mile in that one, 1:11-3 for 3/4 of a mile, and he finished second behind Silver Prospector and ran well. He dug down late, didn't disgrace himself by any means, but maybe that's a little bit more telling of his ability. So I think he's a really good horse. 3 for 5 lifetime with a second to go along with it. Obviously nothing to knock, but this is going to be the toughest race so far, especially when you factor in what he's going to have to deal with early on in the race. So we've talked about the horses. Let's kind of talk about how this pace scenario is going to set up. I see the 4 King Guillermo going out with Wells Bayou and those two knocking heads early on. You're also going to have Saratogan, I imagine, going up to try and enforce the early speed and storm the court with them as well. I'm taking the risk in saying Nadal is going to come from off the pace in this race based on his work patterns. I don't think Bob Baffert wants him on the lead. I think in his works, he's kind of gotten him to the point where mentally he's going to be able to rate off the pace. He doesn't need to be in front. And if Nadal doesn't go to the lead, he's going to be in a really good position because I'm confident King Guillermo and Wells Bayou are going to either struggle because they don't go to the lead or they're going to burn each other out trying to get there, not to mention loads of pressure coming from everywhere else. You can also factor in Tyshaun to possibly be one of those pressing types. From there on out, the rest of those horses pretty much either stone cold closers or horses that will definitely be coming from way off the pace. And because I think the pace is going to be so hot, I think you've got to look for a horse that's not going to be on the lead. You got to come from a horse coming from way out of it. I think Farmington Road is primed for a big race. I said, when we talk about the Kentucky Derby, we talk about finding the horse that's peaking at the right time. And I think that this is one of those horses that is peaking at the right time. Todd Pletcher knows how to have him ready for the first Saturday in May. He's won the Kentucky Derby twice. It is the first Saturday in May, and this horse is very, very steadily improving. So Farmington Road, big long shot on top. Maybe not a big long shot, but, with Nadal in here, I imagine you're going to get a good price on Farmington Road. For second, Nadal. I think Nadal is going to, if he sits off the pace, I think he might just be a little, I don't want to take the risk and go all in on a horse I don't know can rate in this spot. I'm banking on the fact that he's coming from off the pace in this one. And Silver Prospector for third. I don't adhere to the every other idealism of every other race being good for it, but I think that you can draw a line through that Rebel, a crappy race for him there, as well as the Smarty Jones, two just not good races for him. And I think especially if he gets a fast track, he'll be in a good position to run a huge race. So that's my top 3, but there's so many good horses in this race. You could make a very good case for pretty much everyone in this race to crack the top 3, and I couldn't argue on it. That's how good this race is, and I'm so excited for it. Obviously disappointing no Kentucky Derby this weekend, but this is one of the best consolations we could have asked for. So that's all I have for you here covering the second division of the Arkansas Derby, race 13, this upcoming Saturday, and obviously going to be a very exciting race. I wish everybody luck who's playing it, and we'll see you next time.
Trail back then to Social of Fleet with Lens Map. Portos 14th and last. They've straightened. 3/4 was 112.42. The longtime leader is Wells Bayou. New York Traffic drifts off that line. A furlong out from Wells Bayou, who's still finding. Leads by 3 to New York Traffic. Botanist is a one-pace third. Major Fed. Enforceable takes toward the inside, but it's Wells Bayou. Wells Bayou and New York Traffic. Wells Bayou to win the TwinSpires.com Louisiana Derby.